I'm Greg DePalma, and thanks for tuning in to another season of NASCAR coverage on the Prime Sports Radio Network. On this Thursday edition for the 22nd of February, 2018, we're going to recap the Daytona 500 and take a look ahead at Atlanta with race analysts CJ Radoon and Eric Smith. As Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com and KennyBruce.net on the Prime Sports Radio Network, starts now. All right, before we get started, we want to remind you to click on the UWager banner on the Prime Sports Network website. Get started with wagering on the race this weekend in Atlanta with a special $100 risk-free wager if you sign up right now with a $100 minimum deposit. Again, that's UWager. That's the banner on the website. One of the top sports books in the industry, and you'll receive fast and reliable payouts. And if you had Austin Dillon in the 500, then you definitely cashed in on that long shot. Let's first introduce my first analyst to the show. Eric will be with us in about 15 minutes. But first, he's a RotoWire.com writer for NASCAR and F1, as well as a two-time Racing Writer of the Year award winner by the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, CJ Radoon. And CJ, it's always nice to have some driver other than the big names out there get a win. And it wasn't also one of those crazy drivers that never wins, so it kind of worked out. There was a lot that went into it, but still, it was having a different winner was nice.
Yeah, it was a really interesting way the race played out, just to see kind of, who the top contenders were that were taken out early, like Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, and kind of those who were continuing on a little bit further on that ended up getting taken out. Had a number of big accidents, but to see some cool names at the front, like you said, that aren't complete long shots, but are nonetheless guys that are deserving of the win, being able to fight it out at the end, that was pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, now the only thing with Austin Dillon is at some point after this, he is going to have to win a race that he leads a bunch of laps. That's the next step. A couple of wins, is nice. That's a good first step. But that's kind of like what we talked about last year with a couple of different race winners. Is it's nice that these types of drivers win, but the next step is also seeing them outside the plate tracks, especially because this was all a luck kind of race, as we know. But the next step is to see whether Austin Dillon and his team have what it takes to truly be a playoff contender or a championship contender, even though they are in the playoffs already.
Yeah, I mean, the Chevrolets were kind of nowhere throughout the entire speed weeks for Daytona. I mean, it was Ford and Toyota. It was almost certain that it was going to be a Penske or a Joe Gibbs win. But then, like you said, it is a crazy race here in Talladega, or there in Talladega. Both kind of fall into that category. And then we'll see, Chevy's got the new body style. We'll see if that helps the teams like Richard Childress Racing that really didn't have any kind of mark made at Daytona until obviously that last lap when he was able to take the lead, I guess, when it mattered the most.
What did you think about the move by Dillon? I think it's one of those moves where obviously if you're an Almirola fan, you're very upset and all that. If you're a Dillon fan, or if you just are a fan of the sport, I don't have anything wrong with it. I think drivers should act like that more often. It really is a tough way to lose if you're in the lead, but I think it makes it. I think the drama just gets. We've talked a lot about how it's tough in these races, and we don't get enough passing late to win races. So anytime a driver can figure out a way to pass on the final lap for a win, I'm okay. I don't care how he does it.
Yeah, I had absolutely zero problem with that pass. He got a push from Bubba Wallace coming off of turn 2 that pushed him straight down the back straight at a very high rate of speed. Almirola could have moved aside, could have let him go. He chose to block. Obviously, that ended up resulting badly for him, but I don't think that he, has any ill will toward, Austin Dillon and the move. I think he understands as a racer what's going to happen. He was in that position. That was a decision they both made. and that was the way it turned out. I don't think that anybody should necessarily be upset as far as the past goes.
I will say this though. I mean, if I am as much as I can get everything you're saying, and even how Almirola could feel that way, I'd want him to be a little bit more upset than how he acted. That's come on. I mean, dude.
Yeah, the interview was a little interesting afterward, wasn't it? When he came out of the medical center, the only thing he could really say was, "I thought I was going to win the Daytona 500."
Yeah, I mean,
You're
I was
right.
half expecting a Bible in his hand.
Yeah,
To tell
you're
you
probably
the truth.
right.
Yeah, so I mean, come on. But hey, big win for Dylan, and we'll find out whether or not only for Dylan, but of course for Richard Childress Racing, whether or not it's just a restrictor plate win. And that's the same thing for Darrell Wallace. It's a very nice story to have Darrell Wallace runner up in the Daytona 500. He had a great week, so that's excellent. It'd be so great for the sport if Darrell Wallace Jr. for Richard Petty Motorsports would actually be relevant this year. But we have no idea, and I guess we'll find out in Atlanta. This could end up being the only time he finishes in the top 10 all year, or it could be the start of something.
Yeah, entirely possible. Like I said, we don't really know what Chevrolet has. They've got that new body style. It's the Camaro. Everybody thinks that they've got a better aerodynamic package than they had with the old car last year. So we don't have any idea really how that's going to perform on the tracks that make up the majority of the schedule. And, at Daytona, everybody in the pack, it's just kind of a matter of horsepower and how you're able to leverage the draft and side draft and the positions that you get yourself into. So how they handle the rough surface at Atlanta, how it handles the high speeds and the heavy braking into the turns. It's going to be very interesting, and I think this weekend certainly is going to give us a much better preview as to what to expect for the rest of the season.
All right. Also, as far as a couple of young drivers, Elliott and Blaney, I don't think there's any question that the driver of the week was Ryan Blaney. I mean, and he's somebody that we've talked up for the past couple of years. We talked about him in our championship preview, going over predictions when we did the season preview show. You had him as your championship sleeper. That's how much you liked him. I was right there with you. He was also my championship sleeper. I actually put him in the Final Four. So we both love Ryan Blaney, and we both don't think that what we saw this past week had anything to do with restrictor plates.
No, completely agree. I've said up and down, left and right since he came into the sport that he is the real deal, and I think this is the first year, certainly, that he's got the full backing of Penske. Like I said last week in the build-up to Daytona, I think that there are questions about Penske having a third team and the lack of success they've had on that team in the past, but having gone the two-car route for a number of seasons now, I think they understand kind of what went wrong. This is an organization that doesn't enter into things lightly. I think they were testing things out clearly as they had the affiliation with Wood Brothers last year and before that really started to show some of Blaney's potential. And then to move him under the fold into the Penske banner proper, into the full garage, I think it's going to be a great move for him. Fords look extremely strong, Penske Fords in particular. So I think this is really his year to break out, have a number of victories, potentially even have a shot at the championship. A real shot at the championship.
What did you think about Elliott? Because I got to tell you, I was a little bit. I don't know. I mean, we talked last year about how it was good that Chase started to learn how to be aggressive, and by the end of this, I mean, it took a few weeks, and boom, it was like he got it, and then all of a sudden, he was a completely different driver. He understood what was going on out there, and if he was going to win races with the big boys, he was going to have to be very aggressive like they are. It was nice that he showed some aggressiveness for the week, but he seemed like he was too aggressive. I mean, I thought he was out of control for most of the week, and there was no way that I think he was going to end that race.
Yeah, that's interesting, and he didn't even come close. So 207 laps over the scheduled distance. So yeah, he just barely made it over by one lap at 101 before he ended up in that accident. Yeah, I don't know whether it was him trying to compensate for the fact that Chevrolet was kind of not really there with Ford and Toyota. Maybe it was just the fact that it was Daytona. Maybe he saw what Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was doing before, where he was acting very aggressive. Stenhouse didn't make it to the end of this race either. So, we'll see how it plays out at the next couple of tracks. I would chalk that up probably more toward draft experience and just restrictor plate racing in general. The cars with the new aerodynamic package throughout the entire week, everybody was loose, and I think that's really difficult for a young driver to handle. I think we'll see probably more of the normal Chase Elliott that we came to expect toward the end of last season, starting this week in Atlanta.
All right, we'll talk about this race in Atlanta, because Atlanta has actually, and this wasn't always the case, and I'm not sure, and I'm sure. Look, if you look at all the changes that every year NASCAR goes through these changes, these tweaks on the cars, and something happened along the line, like about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago, where Atlanta went from all right, it's okay, and nothing special, and maybe that was part of the reason why they took a race away from them, to being one of the best tracks in the series. So this should be a real good race, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, it's got all the combinations that you need. It's got really old, worn out banking, so that's going to test the tires. It's also going to give the drivers the ability to move up and down the grooves to be able to find a place to run their car, depending on how the handling is at any given point throughout the afternoon. It's got the high speeds. It's got high horsepower. So you're going to see a lot of side-by-side racing, and I think with they were going to repave it after last season's race. They chose not to do it after all the drivers came out and really complained hard about it. So they're going to reassess it after this weekend. But I think the sweet spot of the asphalt is there. It's a challenge for setup. It's a challenge for tires. It's a challenge for drivers in general. It's bumpy. So I think all of those factors combined with the low downforce settings kind of give these guys a little bit more opportunity to race each other head to head.
So the drivers were complaining about what?
The drivers were complaining that the plans for Atlanta were to repave it after last year's race.
Okay.
Everybody complained. They liked the roughness. They liked the character as tracks wear in. They didn't want to go to a cookie cutter kind of billiard table smooth surface, because they knew that the wear and tear on the tires and the bumps in the surface contribute to that great racing that you just mentioned.
So so what? They did that? They have done that? The paving?
They have not.
Oh,
so
they're going to do it after this race.
Yep, they're going to assess it again after this race.
They're going to say,
okay, so not necessarily going to do it.
So NASCAR is doing what we've seen them do in the past. They're going to try to rob us from something that's working and make it boring again. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
right.
seriously. I mean, what's the reason? I mean, why do they even think this way? What is it? There's got to be a reason. See, I know whenever you think about certain things, that changes and policies and all that stuff, follow the money. But in this situation, I got to know. Can you think of any reason? We just mentioned it, and the drivers just mentioned it. Atlanta had become an exciting racetrack. It's one of the better races for us to watch. We're sick of the boring races. And here's NASCAR trying to screw around with that. Why would you do that? What's the reason?
No idea, but they did come to their senses and they delayed it. I think a parallel obviously would be Darlington Raceway. So that place, it was so great way back when, and it's getting better again as it gets older. The old, really rough pavement just works wonders in terms of the ability for the guys to race side by side. I think just with the bumps and kind of newer is better kind of mentality, blind to the fact that the surface can actually contribute to the show. I think they had the plan to repave it, and just with all the outcry and being able to see the good racing that we had last year, finally came to their senses, thankfully.
All right, Keselowski won the race last year, but Kevin Harvick dominated the race until he got caught for speeding, right? This was
correct.
A lot of drivers got caught for speeding last year.
Harvick, 292 laps led. I mean, he wasn't challenged the entire day up until that point.
And he speeds. Oh, geez. Okay, so anyway, I'm sure he got enough points, though, with those stage points, so you got a consolation. Any particular drivers just at this point in time? Are you going to have – now, when does your race preview come out? Is it usually after you see a set of practice or qualifying as well?
Yeah, it'll be after qualifying will be generally when I put it out. So they qualify, I think, tomorrow around 5:15 or so. So it'll be either late Friday night or early Saturday morning. Should be able to get it up on the site, and that'll be a preview based on everybody's current times. It'll have the first practice in there as well as wherever they're starting for the race on Sunday.
Do you get into previewing the race at some point during the week, or do you wait and really put 90% of your thought until after you see practice and qualifying?
So there are a couple things that you can, or that I do, take care of kind of midweek, but they're all wrapped up into that same article. So I can talk about things like the way that the track contributes to the racing. I can talk about obviously what happened last year and any kind of anticipation as to what we learned in Daytona as to what to expect this week. But really, when it comes down to it, especially being just the second race in the year, you kind of got to wait until that at least that first practice goes by, and then hopefully qualifying thereafter. So about 90% of it, like you said, ultimately comes in after the qualifying is complete.
So right now you don't even have. Do you have any, any drivers out there that you already are looking at before?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do. So just looking at past statistics, I mean, more recently, he didn't start off very well at Atlanta early in his career, but the past 5 races have actually been pretty good for him, Joey Logano. And given the Penske power that we saw at Daytona, I would anticipate that would carry through at least some momentum for him coming into this week. And then obviously Kevin Harvick with, like I said, over almost 300 laps led in last year's race, also in a Ford. He looked very strong at Daytona as well. I would anticipate that that's not just a restrictor plate or just a Daytona thing. I would guarantee you that both of those guys will be toward the front very early starting tomorrow once they unload.
All right. Well, Joey Logano is my championship pick. I know you weren't on the air when I gave that the other day, so now you know.
I think you got a good chance with him.
All right. All right. Well, we'll see. He got off to a good start at Daytona, but then again, it's Daytona, so we'll see. CJ, appreciate it. We'll look out for your report on Saturday, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, CJ. That's CJ Radoon. And again, rotowire.com. We will have the links up to his articles twice a week. Matter of fact, I believe the previews we will have. I think we're able to post the entire previews. I don't know. I don't want to promise you anything because we didn't get it in last week. I know that his reports, barometer reports, the ones following every race that are posted earlier in the week, those you have to be subscribed to, even though we do provide the link on the website. And of course, though, our next guest, well, he doesn't have such restrictions. So we do let you see how you can read Eric Smith's reports over on racereviewonline.com. He's their lead motorsports writer. He joined me on race day at the Daytona 500 on Sunday. He's back and ready for Atlanta. I don't think he's going to Atlanta, but he's ready for Atlanta. Eric, how's everything going?
Going well. Been a real busy day. I'd like to be in Atlanta, but had some Indy 500 things that we had to take care of this morning with the ticket unveiling and all that. So if I end up down there, it'd be a last minute decision because I would have had to probably leave today.
Yeah, right.
To get down there for practice tomorrow. But I also cover the IndyCar side and had some stuff at the Indiana State House this morning with a ticket unveiling and talking to Doug Bowles, the head of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then head of IndyCar and the defending Indy 500 winner Takuma Sato. So had a pretty busy morning with all that going on.
Well, how did you were there, of course, for everything? How was the atmosphere during and after the race, after Austin Dillon's race, being able to win on the last lap?
Seemed very receptive and good. The crowd was cheering, but some of it, I think you did hear some boos, obviously, because they didn't like the way how the ending took place. But you also had a lot of the 30 fans. Dale Earnhardt Senior's fans in the past that were cheering on the 3 to win too. So you kind of had that cool storyline. I know the track, kind of the immediate impact, there really wasn't. You have the I think it's called the ISM Vision, the replay board there at the track, but you really couldn't tell from the grandstands per se of what really transpired there in the backstretch until probably most of those people got home and saw a different replay.
Okay.
So I would say it was pretty receptive. I would say a little more than last year.
Yeah. What about your opinion on that? I both CJ and I kind of, I mean, I was okay. We were both okay with what happened, just for the fact that NASCAR needs passes on last laps anytime they can get them, in my opinion. And CJ kind of felt the same way. But look, if you're Eric Almirola and you're his team, you should be a little bit upset. Maybe not 100% upset, but you should be a little bit upset. A lot more upset than the way he sounded right after the race. That's for sure.
Yeah, my take's kind of like your guys'. Is I don't really have a problem with it, only because really the circumstances. And I mean, from talking with Austin and Eric afterwards, Austin came to the press conference. Eric gave some quotes after the infield care center, but he really didn't have a problem with the way Austin Dillon raced them, only because that's just a byproduct of restrictor plate racing. Unfortunately, the first place car is always going to be at a disadvantage to everybody behind, because the law of physics, in the draft, the second place car is faster than the first place car. And I really made my mind up, or I didn't really blame Austin Dillon when I saw the onboard camera of Denny Hamlin. And Austin made a move to the inside, and Almirola blocked him. And then he went up to the high side, and that's what got Almirola. Is he came up on Dillon was kind of right there, and it turned him into the outside safer barrier. And to me, the part of the problem was he shouldn't have been blocking. But that's what caused all that calamity all weekend, was blocking. And really the only way to change it, to me, would be you have to try to outlaw some of the blocking, or it's just kind of how NASCAR's done it, is police yourself. You want to kind of buyer beware. If you're going to block, this is the stuff that could happen.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where Eric Almirola was, look, I don't blame Austin Dillon. He's in the gas pedal. He's not supposed to hit the brakes, because that would have just caused an even bigger issue behind. He's got to stay in the pedal to the floor and go for the win. And he flat out said, I blocked him. That was my fault. I came up on him, and I'm trying to win the race too. And that's my only way to win, was hopefully I could get in front of him and cut his momentum, but he was already there. And he almost just seemed frustrated just from the allure of being 2 corners away from winning the Daytona 500, but also frustrated for the fact that it's just part of this restrictor plate package. I mean, that's just what you get, is you're the leader and you want to hold your lead, but
yeah,
the car behind you is so significantly faster that even moving up to block them, that's what you get. I mean, that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. bonehead move there at the end of the first stage, blocking took out a whole lot of cars.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. I mean, at the end of the race, last lap, I think we can all understand it, but way before that, at any other time, there were some drivers out there that, like Stenhouse, like Chase Elliott. I mean, we can go on. It's just, what are you guys doing? Relax. I mean, it's just no reason to have as just seems like there was a lot of impatience out there just too early in the race.
There was. I get where Stenhouse thinks he needs the stage points, because I think that was a little more telling of what could be to come with the Ford package away from restrictor plates. Like, maybe they're saying that they're going to be not as close as they think they're going to be, and that they could be down in really an aerodynamic disadvantage compared to the Chevy and Toyotas, where he thought, I need all the points I can get no matter what race it is. And because I don't think there's going to be 16 winners, so I need to get one of those couple wild card spots. I got to make it in on points. These 9 points for second place in the stage may make or break me come Richmond or Indy now, the last race before the cutoff. So
he's wrong.
That's my only defense I could make for him. But other than that, was just about one of the most bonehead moves I've seen in racing in a long time. It's lap 59 and you're blocking for second place. You're not even going for a stage win. And he in turn actually finished third in that stage. So I made a note of that to come back and refer to this for when we get towards the late summer months, to see where Stenhouse is, if he hasn't won yet. See if that 1 point, or those points, that 1 point difference between second and third, or if the 7 or 8 points that he got for that stage, how much that really factor into making a move that you just took out a whole slew of cars.
Yeah, if you want to have a big margin between first, second, third, fourth stage points, that may be one thing, but I mean, there's just not enough. It doesn't matter. I mean, especially in the 500, and especially at a track that you've or a restrictor plate race that you've won twice. So you can't screw. I mean, that's the one race where he needs to come into the race and understand his game plan. His game plan at the Daytona 500 for that particular driver needs to be different than anybody else, because I've won restrictor plate races. This is the one race that I need to do whatever I can at the end of the race to win. Screw the points for this race, and then screw the points for this race because it's the freaking 500.
That's exactly right. And that was my thought process was, look, this is your one shot, really one of 4 or 3, I guess, for the regular season, that you're really going to have a shot to win this race. And if you look before that point, he had a really good car, and Ford was by far leaps and bounds better than everybody else. You just wouldn't you rather be there in the end and finish? I would rather fall out of the draft and I would rather finish 12th in the first stage and get 0 stage points, but no, I can live and fight another battle later in the race and cause that. Because I think I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, not many laps into the second stage that he had a motor problem, and it came back and got him. So it's like, so what did you really gain by this? Now you're 2 or 3 laps down, and now you have no shot of winning this race. So I think he really hurt himself there, because if he would have stayed out of trouble, I think he would have been a player there in the end. But I guess it's just kind of that war of attrition. He took himself really out, and a lot of other people.
All right, so no reason for you to, in any way, for you to feel like any of the drivers anything that you felt about any drivers going into that race has changed your mind at all, right? One way or another.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still feel the same way. I think this weekend we're really going to get kind of a real gauge on how the season's going to go.
What's your gut tell you about Darrell Wallace? Do you think that it's more likely it's the only top 10 for him this year, or that this is potentially the beginning of something pretty good this year with their team?
I actually wrote about that yesterday. Just hoping people don't have such high expectations for him, because I not that was a fluke. I think he had a good restrictor plate car. He's a good restrictor plate driver.
He had a good week. Yep.
I just don't think we're not going to see that out of him this year. It's nothing against him. It's just nothing against Richard Petty Motorsports, but that's just kind of the car that they've got moving forward. Why would we expect in 3 months difference from the end of last year to this year that car is going to miraculously be a car contending for a win? And I went back and looked at Eric Almirola's stats in that car, and he took over in 2012 and obviously finished last year in 2017. And he made 209 starts with 1 career win and just 10 total top 5 finishes in basically 5 years. I just hope people, because looking back on it, I would say most of the drivers say going into the season that the most popular driver, that award is pretty much going to be handed to Chase Elliott. But I think after leaving Daytona, Darrell Wallace Jr. is right there. I mean, he gained a huge following from Lewis Hamilton to Hank Aaron to stars reaching out to him. And then here he finishes second. I just hope that these newfound fans don't come in and expect they'll see Atlanta him finishing 15th, or Vegas the next week he finishes 20th, and they just start seeing his stats decline and think, oh, that was a fluke. Well, yes and no, it was a fluke. And no, yes, it was a fluke, but no, it wasn't. Just strictly for the matter is that's a restrictor plate race. That's not going to be anything like we're going to see for a majority of the year. That I think Wallace is really, if he can contend for a top 20 finish, I think is a good race for him at this point.
Well, it was just a few years ago
where really win.
It was just a few years ago where Eric had what was it, 3 years ago, when things started to look good. They were pretty consistent. It wasn't like they were winning races, but they were seemed to always be in the top 15. But then things, of course, he got the injury the year after. But I mean, he struggled and then had the injury. But the other thing is maybe the other ray of hope is what happened late last year, where Almirola raced his best over his last 6 races. That included 3 top 10s and a 5th place finish at Talladega. But it was a decent sign. And so like you said, is the best case scenario him finishing 11th and 15th and 9th and 13th, and that would be pretty good. That would be great. That would be excellent. I think that'd be a great first year for these guys. And maybe so if everybody kind of gets that, then I think they'll be okay. But anything more than that is expecting way too much. We hope it would be nothing better than for the sport, not just for that particular driver, but for the sport in general, for drivers like Darrell Wallace in his situation, to actually contend in the top 10 every few weeks, but unlikely.
Yeah, and I would love, and I think Bubba could be a star in the sport. I mean, this weekend showed. I mean, he has a lot of talent to finish second. Unfortunately, I think his talent far outweighs the car he's in just right now. I think Richard Petty Motorsports, they're in a transition. If everybody would remember, too, if you go back to just leaving Homestead last year, we were questioning whether that team was even going to show up on the track at Daytona. They had no driver, no sponsor. It looked like the team was going to fold. And then they get the help from Chevy. They move into Richard Childress' shop, which I think in the long run could help them. I think this could rejuvenate them. But they just need kind of a year just to get all this new resources under their belt. I mean, you got a new car with Chevy. You got a new alliance with Richard Childress. You totally moved buildings. You got a brand new driver who's only made 4 Cup starts before heading into this year. That I just hope people give them the time to gel.
Yeah.
Because it seems like this day and age, it's like people just want to compare other drivers to like Jeff Gordon or Tony Stewart and think you should come in and start winning races. And if you don't, there's the door. But I think that if people can give Petty and Wallace a good 2 years, they just pump the brakes, let him get some funding, let him get some races under his belt, get some better resources. This could be a very good team in another 2 to 3 years. But are people going to be patient enough for that is going to be the other side of the story. And this day and age, I don't know if people are that patient anymore.
Was anybody better the entire week than Ryan Blaney?
I would struggle to find one. Honestly, I think Blaney lost that race on Sunday. He admitted that. He made that wrong move there going into turn 1, getting into Kurt Busch. Because I thought when he got shuffled out there, I believe it was Denny Hamlin with like 3 or 4 to go, he kind of hung him out to dry, and it looked like he was going to get stuck in the middle.
And then he came back.
It just showed you his power.
Yeah.
By the next lap, I'm like, how did he get there? He was now on the inside lane.
Yeah.
And like, he's going to win this race. And then he got shuffled to the outside line, and he just got impatient, and he admitted that he was panicking. There was 2 laps to go.
Well, we talked about that last week. We talked about how tough it was going to be for Blaney to win the race because of how impatient he looked in the previous races during that week.
And that's exactly what happened. I think if he would have let Kurt Busch, because Kurt, obviously, his plan was he was going to try that high line. And if he just would have locked bumpers with him and kind of pushed him, kind of make it 3 wide there for the lead, push Kurt by,
and then
then those two kind of have their own drag race to the end, I think Blaney would have beat him.
Yeah.
But his impatience came back and got him.
Did you notice, and I've seen this before from Kurt, where I forget when it was a race the last couple of years on a plate track, where he did the same exact thing, where he was in the lead and he didn't block. And I'm not talking about the type of Aric Almirola block. I'm talking about the type of blocks you see from drivers like Kurt, because he had about 2 laps where he was in the lead, and he was in the lead so far ahead at times where we've seen really good drivers like Kozlowski and Junior and all those guys that they'll go up and down and up and down and make sure that you are not going to get past them and up and down. And Kurt, I've seen him twice not do this properly and just allow the drivers to go by him. And it's like, what are you doing? I mean, there's no reason in the world that Kurt Busch shouldn't have at least been in the situation that Aric Almirola was in at the end. And if he would have lost that way, fine. But there was no reason in the world for Kurt Busch to have allowed one of the, and I don't know who it was that actually he allowed to go by him, where he never regained the lead. But you just don't do that. You can't. You have to go up and down the track and make sure that nobody tries to get by you.
Yeah, he's been one, and he's kind of talked about that, because because that's what the move you're referring to is like they call it the side draft, where they just kind of try to cut people's momentum off if they go up and down like that to hold their lead so somebody can't side draft them and push by. Well, Kurt's always kind of said he's adapted to, because he said until the last lap, he doesn't want to really, unless there's like a few to go and get worried about getting shuffled back, that if somebody wants by him, then his thing is, I'm just going to hold my line. And if they've got drafting help, I don't want to block and get kind of worried about what Stenhouse did and block and get caught up in a wreck or ruin somebody else's day when I know my car is good enough I can come back through. So if I hold my line, I know I'm not going to get wrecked because everybody's going to be going around me on the other lane. I just need to hold my lane and I'll be fine. And he kind of did that, like you said, did that on Sunday. And it almost worked for him where he was running fourth there with 2 laps to go, where then it was go time where he was going to go on the outside and hoping Blaney would give him the drafting help and push him by the Hamlin. I think it was Almirola was on the inside lane and get pushed by them where it then coming to the white flag, those two would have the momentum and be running 1-2. And then he's only blocking really one car, not a pack. So it almost worked for him. But yeah, he what you notice is correct. He doesn't really like the side draft or defend a position early in the race, and which is a totally different Kurt Busch than we've kind of seen. It's almost like a mature Kurt Busch. It's like, who are you?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather want to be creating the drama and the messes? But
yeah.
He's just basically saying, I'd rather be there in the end, and I'm not racing for points on lap 70. I'd rather win the race. So I'm just going to get out of the way. If I'm leading, great. If somebody wants to pass me, have at it, because I want to make sure my car is there for the end. And it almost worked, because if you remember right, he won the first stage.
Oh, yeah,
he stayed out of trouble and avoided that wreck.
Yep. Speaking of impatient, there was no way. I forget what it was. It was about halfway through the race, and there had already been a couple of close calls right around Chase Elliott. And I said to myself after that, the way he was racing, there is no way he's finishing this race. No way. I don't know what it is that it's like he has changed so much, I think almost too much. I just thought he was way over aggressive in that race. And you can't be that aggressive in a plate track race with that many cars out on the track. It was like he was worried about every spot.
Yeah, I read that too. And I wrote about that coming into the season, that it seems like when the whole Denny Hamlin, it seemed like the playoffs last year, he had this newfound aggression. He was this new driver. He was competing for wins, and it's like, this is a different Chase Elliott. And then the whole Denny Hamlin thing happened, and it's like this guy like just turned to possessed. I mean, he was. It's just like obviously we can't see with a helmet and a visor on, but it's like this. It's almost like I would envision this crazy look in this guy's eyes now when he's racing. It's like he used to just seem like this happy-go-lucky Chase Elliott, but it's like this. He's out for a vendetta. While I think that aggression is going to help him
it will.
This season.
Yeah, well, yeah,
restrictor plate track.
No, that's not
almost
it.
Like you got to harness it a little
yes.
bit. It's like, whoa there. Because that move that he created, that wreck there, I think it was like lap 103 with Brad Keselowski, he should have just rode behind Keselowski. And I saw an onboard camera of Kevin Harvick, and he was kind of saying the same thing. He never in a million years thought those two would have wrecked because of how good their cars were. So he was just riding around on the inside line while there was, I think it was a 3-car breakaway ahead of him. And he just thought those two would just, hey, I'll just hop in line and ride behind these guys and get really towards the end of the stage. And he was just as shocked as anybody else when Chase tried to make a move, and just, he's saying, like, I don't know what he was doing then. He would have been just fine just riding in third for a little while. But, yeah, I think that aggression hurt him, and I would be a little scared to be riding around him at Talladega in May, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that was the wreck, too, that took out Suarez. Suarez was the first one. Now, the second wreck that Elliott caused was like Danica and William Byron. No, William Byron wasn't. He was in the first one. Danica and Harvick and Keselowski and Casey Kane. That was the other one in that one. Okay, because I know Daniel was like fourth, and it was one of those really bad ones where you get clipped from behind when you're ahead of the accident. You know, it was one of those that it don't happen very often. but it can get you if the car moves its way really fast up the track, which is what happened and clipped his rear.
And that was a brutal hit from that visor can that he took. That he got hit and it got turned head on, and that wreck, and which some of the wrecks, it's like you could write about a big one later, but that one, it's like, man, I'm gonna have to already start writing because that took out 2 Gibbs cars and 2 Hendrick cars are caught up in that wreck, and they've been dominating Speed Weeks these last several years, and 50% of both of their arsenals already taken out in one crash. We're not even into the first stage yet.
Isn't this? Is this just starting? I don't know. This seems to be starting to happen more often, where we're getting, 10 cars left, 15 cars left at the end of these restricted plate races. I mean, it's great to have the wrecks and stuff, but can we wait till the last lap or two on some of these wrecks so we have a lot more cars and a lot more really good action and chances for 10 cars to pass, and instead of having, Austin Dillon and Darrell Wallace first and second because all the other good cars have wrecked?
Yeah, and that's what gets frustrating about those races, because I saw a stat, I believe Fox Sports put out, that out of the 3 races, so you had 80 cars combined between the Cup and the Xfinity, and then you had 32 with the trucks. Out of all those basically cars and trucks that started this last weekend, 99 of them were caught up in a crash at some point. It's just like, so we go all this off season, and I can only imagine as a business standpoint for these teams that you secure sponsors and funding, and you got all this off season, you got all this money built up, and let's go to Daytona and let's start the year off, and let's wreck 99 race cars. It's just, I mean, Jimmy Johnson wrecked in every race he was in. So they're already on their 4th car. So granted, Hendrick has the resources, but it's still a hit in the pocketbook no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
The money doesn't grow on trees, so somebody's paying for that.
Yeah.
And the sponsorship for Lowe's isn't going to cover crash damage. So that's just it's got to be frustrating for a team aspect to have all this off season and then go down there and you're tearing up millions upon millions of dollars of equipment just one race in. That part has got to be frustrating.
What I'd like to see happen is if they had like if they're ever able to figure out a way to have the championship end at Daytona the way it really should be. That what they would have to do though is at this point is that they would have to eliminate all the other drivers that aren't in the playoffs or something, because it wouldn't be fair, because eventually all the playoff cars would probably wreck. But if you had like 10 or 15 cars in the field and at least you had a draft and at least you had that, then these guys really wouldn't wreck each other, especially with a playoff or a championship on the line. And it might be the only way that you could figure out doing that at Daytona. But I just would love to see it, because you would have a number of cars that couldn't win the championship in the race that would be dying to win the Daytona 500 and doing everything they could in the final 10 laps or something against guys trying to win a championship. But wishful thinking on my behalf.
Yeah, that would be. And if I was in that championship 4, how many other drivers they want to have in it, honestly, if I would let those guys wreck in front, I would just totally lose the draft. I'd be like, you guys go on ahead because you're all.
Well, that's the thing,
anyway.
though. It's the 500, though. So that's the question you have to say to yourself. Wow, do I want to win the 500 or win the championship?
Well, and it would be truly the Super Bowl, because that's what I think confuses a lot of fans.
It does.
They call this their Super Bowl, but it's their first race.
Exactly. That's why I think if there's a way for them to figure that out, then that would be awesome. All right. So now I didn't have enough time to go over this with you on Sunday at the race, but I asked all 3 of you guys to give me your top 4 tracks if there was if they actually brought back something similar to the Winston, where in golf you've got the majors and in tennis the slams. So it came up with your 4 racetracks, and talk about actually, let me see if I want to compare the tracks, because you have Daytona with the 3 of the tracks that you had were similar to CJ, I think. Let's see, CJ, Bristol, you had Bristol, Darlington, and Daytona. Daytona, of course, we're all going to have. CJ had Bristol, and Kenny had Darlington. So you guys were similar with Daytona, Bristol, Darlington, but the one track that you had that they did not have was Indy. Now, I think Kenny mentioned that was one of the tracks that he really thought hard of having. So I think that might have been like his fifth out of the fourth. But you put the Brickyard in there. I was thinking about that as well, and I only decided on Charlotte. But I was definitely thinking the thing that really hurt it for me with Indianapolis is, and it's only one thing. It's how boring the racing is at the track.
Yep.
That's it. Other than that, it would make too much sense not to have that race in there. But that you put it in there.
Well, and the main thing I put in there was because I was the same way with Kenny. I debated Indy and Charlotte, and from all these years, I think it's probably last 2 or 3 years running. It's a repetitive question that I ask a lot of the drivers in the press conferences, or if I get a one-on-one media availability with them, or even Doug Bowles, the president of the Speedway, is the crowds are gone, the racing is there's just no passing. It's a high-speed parade.
Mm-hmm.
Is this still a marquee event? Do you still want to win here? And it's just unanimous. I think it was Denny Hamlin that made the quote. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago when he said he didn't care if nobody were sitting in those stands, that this race is on his bucket list that as much as the Daytona 500, just because it's Indy. And so that race, and I haven't had a driver tell me yet. I know Carl Edwards said the same thing a few years ago, that it's just the history of this place, that I think it's just probably because of the Indy 500 lore, that it's just the history of the Speedway. It looks the same as it's always looked. Obviously, they've had more seating in places, have taken some down, but the track's always looked like that. And just the thought of winning Indy and being an Indy winner, it just has these drivers charged up. So they've all pretty much said that they still consider it a major. So out of process of elimination, I eliminated Charlotte only because of that, because Daytona you got to have in there.
Yeah.
I feel like Bristol, because of the night race, the short track, you got to have a short track in there.
Absolutely.
And then Darlington, the Southern 500 with the whole throwback weekend, it's Labor Day weekend. It would make sense. It was part of that once in a million. So that's why I went with that. But the only thing is I looked at it as, I think 3 of those 4 races are right there in consecutive weeks. I think they go from Bristol, then have a week off, and then go to Darlington, and then they'll go to Indy. So it's like, well, that wouldn't work.
No, they would definitely have to change the schedule.
But
yes.
If I had to get the 4 tracks, and nobody asked the follow-up question, I didn't get a chance, because you really kind of only get one question at a press conference, especially with the winner, like Austin Dillon, is he made the comment on the broadcast about, I've won 2 of them now, I want to get the other 2, kind of referring because of the Coke 600 win and then now the Daytona 500. And my follow-up question to him, and that would probably be the next race that I'm at, is what are your other 2? Because he referred to that as kind of a Grand Slam before. He said, I've got 2 of them.
Okay.
Is my follow-up to him would be, what are his other 2?
Sure.
Because he did win the 600, and now he's won the 500. And he made that comment, well, what's your other 2? Because that would put Charlotte and Daytona in there. So is he talking about Bristol, Darlington, Indy? To him, what would be considered his 4? And he kind of opened that up where you can start asking other drivers that again is, hey, Austin Dillon said, I've got 2 of them and he wants the other 2. Well, what are those other 2 to you? Because Denny Hamlin said the same thing at the Brickyard last year, because I asked him in his press conference that when his win at New Hampshire the week before, it was like his 31st win or something, and everybody ahead of that win mark that is in the Hall of Fame have had at least those wins, and he's got a Daytona 500 win. What do you think a Brickyard win would put you in, like a for sure Hall of Fame ballot without winning a championship? And he said basically, yeah, that was the Brickyard to him is his next one he wants to win.
Cool.
So I know where he stands, but where does Austin Dillon stand? That opened up a good story, I think, that could work on throughout the year.
All right, so before I let you go, Atlanta, Keselowski stole the win last year, and Harvick was the dominating driver. Just talked a little bit about this with CJ because and CJ couldn't answer the question because maybe there is no answer to it because it really didn't make any sense to me when he told me how NASCAR wanted to repave Atlanta when we have talked up Atlanta the last few years as one of the more exciting. It had become one of the more exciting tracks. It wasn't 5 years ago, 6 years ago, but it sure has. And maybe not coincidentally, it has become an exciting track because the pavement has started to wear down. And here's NASCAR wanting to ruin all that by repaving the racetrack. So my question was, and maybe I don't know if you have the answer, but seriously, what could they be thinking? Why would they want to repave a track where the drivers and the fans love the racing?
The only reason I know from what they've been talking about is because I actually wrote about this today when I got back from the State House downtown. Was the track is literally falling apart, and they had to actually, from what the Atlanta Motor Speedway general manager said, that they have repatched 15 places on that track.
Okay.
In the off season, just that are just completely crumbling, and they're afraid. I believe was it the 2010 Daytona 500, the year the McMurray won, where they had to throw a red flag because they had a hole in the track.
Sure.
That they said just with Atlanta, with the brutal, he said brutal, which I'm like, come to Indiana, you'll see a brutal winter. That just with the weather from really hot in the summer to as cold as it gets in the winter months, that it just, the expanding and contracting of the surface has just caused it to crack and crumble. So they worked on in the off season as far as patching it, but from what it sounds like, from what I hear, it's not even going to be debated once this race is over this weekend that they're going to repave this track. And the only reason they're doing it is just because the track's crumbling. They would prefer not to, but they said it's now getting to be a safety issue, which is the track's crumbling. And honestly, my prediction, and this is why I kind of wrote about it today, was the weather aspect this weekend is it doesn't look good on Sunday because the latest I saw, there's over an 80% chance of rain.
Oh, okay.
But what happens is when it rains on an old surface, the water gets underneath it, and it creates these things called weepers, where the water has to escape back out of the cracks of the tracks, and it just takes forever. So no matter how much time you try to run trucks and the air tightens and everything over it, it just doesn't ever fully get dry. And I'm fearful this weekend that say the day portion it's just raining and it just gets delayed, and they're like, well, we got lights, we can run it at night. And say it stops raining, well, then you get at nighttime cooler temperatures that it's going to struggle getting this thing dry. And that's the new thing that they're kind of worried about going into this weekend is it's not necessarily just the rain. It's if this track was paved, it would just take an hour and a half, and we can get this thing dried and get going. But now we've got to worry about these weepers, and these things just create havoc. So I think if you get a torrential downpour for over an hour or two down there, even if it's Sunday morning, I just don't feel very confident they're going to race. Well, now you're into Monday, and there's a more of a chance of a rain for Monday. So what happens if the race gets rain delayed from Sunday to Monday, and now you're into Tuesday, and there's a chance of rain I saw on Tuesday, which now we're getting 5 days out, which is hard to predict weather-wise, but there's a chance of rain Tuesday. But say they get the race in Tuesday. Well, they go west for this coming next weekend, so that's asking a lot for these teams to go from all these wrecked cars from Daytona, turn around, go to Atlanta. Now you're not running until Monday or Tuesday, and now, oh, by the way, you got to pack up. You're racing in Vegas next Sunday, and you got to be on the track on Friday. So now you're taking a lot of resources away, and then they're going to be out there. They go Vegas, Phoenix, Montana for 3 weeks. So that's a really tight schedule that you're really now dealing with only because of weepers. That's the main thing they basically said is why the repave, they wanted to happen. They agree with the drivers, and I agree with the drivers. That race has been phenomenal. And honestly, say it doesn't rain this weekend, say they can get this race in, maybe the rain comes in Sunday night. This may be one of your better races of the year because you got the track's going to be hot and slick, which it hasn't been that way in a while at Atlanta. And look how good of racing it's produced because it's always been kind of cooler temperatures down there. Or before it was run on Labor Day weekend under the lights. Now you're going to have an aged track with a hot and slick surface, which is going to create guys sliding around, finding multiple lanes. So I think you could have a really, really, really good race as long as it doesn't rain until after the race is over. So that's, to me, the weather is going to be a storyline to watch this weekend, as well as the pit stops.
It is actually surprising that I can't recall when they've had to deal with like 3 straight days of rain. And yet there are places where it can rain pretty bad on and off for 3 or 4 days. And I've never remembered that ever happening. They've been very fortunate that they haven't had to worry. I mean, has there been a situation, as you recall, where they've actually had two suspension days and had to race on a Tuesday?
Honestly, I can't on the top of my head in a while. I cannot think of one on NASCAR. The latest one in my mind that comes to the top of my memory was the actual 1997 Indy 500, and this is just my random sports memory. It's like I log it in the bank in my brain. I was only 9 years old, and that race was scheduled obviously for a Sunday. They got like 13 laps in, it rained. Monday was Memorial Day, it rained, and I remember my parents letting me out of school, and I went on Tuesday to the Indy 500, and that was the last time that I could ever remember of something like that happening, where you're not rained out 1 day or 2 days.
Yeah.
You're into day 3.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very realistic thing that can happen here in Atlanta this weekend. If they don't get this in, it's only because of this weeper situation. Because if you didn't have that, then, I mean, they're not talking about all day washout rain, but you need to get the track dry. But on another topic, I am still shocked that you see on these baseball fields, or even sometimes football if it gets too much, that you have tarps that you pull out on the field.
Yes.
That they haven't figured out a way to get a tarp so you can put underneath safer barriers and pull them over the track.
I've said that for
that
5
way
or
when the
10
rolled
years.
Up and you get going.
Yes, I don't understand. I mean, you would think technology today, somebody somewhere would come up with this idea. I don't understand.
And it would be a lot of tarping material, but somebody's got to have an idea for this.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot better, and it would be worth the money for NASCAR compared to all of the delays and lost revenue from going from network TV to a Monday race. Yeah, absolutely. You would think somebody could come up with that. But again, there are so many things. I mean, I know it's a lot more technologically advanced, but another thing, just like you're saying, you would hope that they could at some point try to figure out how to get a track that is freshly paved. Like, how can you work a track that is freshly paved and yet kind of make it, the balance between it being paved properly and being worn out enough so you do get the cars, the handling's tougher, all of that, the tires wearing down. If they could figure out a way to do that with some of these tracks, that would be, that would be an incredible thing, because that's really what we want to see. We want to see again, I understand exactly what you're saying, but if there's a way to figure out to make the tracks a certain way where, it doesn't have to have so many negative issues to it, or it's not completely paved and nobody's passing, but you get it like right in the perfect window of where you want it. I mean, that would be great, but I mean, I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, I don't either, because that's the biggest fear that Atlanta officials are facing, because they're kind of a sister track to Texas, and they got that repave, and here that's a one-groove track. Same with Kentucky Speedway. That turned into a one-groove track. It takes years to build up enough tire rubber, enough character, and winters and weather in that track to build multiple grooves, because it's almost with the engineering, like they keep saying, you can't unlearn what you already know. So these cars are so technologically advanced now with engineering departments that the low line, they can figure out the fastest way around, and it's a copycat kind of type series. They're all just going to follow the leader, because that's the only way around in the best grip. Why would somebody run a high line if the low line is quicker around and they lose spots? And if you step out of line and you get past, why would you do that? And unfortunately, that's what Atlanta is going to end up becoming, and that's why they listen to the drivers and try to patch it. And that, unfortunately, I just don't know how much more patching they can do until the whole thing is just repaved. And then you got like I said, the weepers thing going. That aspect that if it ends up getting the race running on a Tuesday and this weepers is the reason, and I think it's the decision's already going to be made. That you got to repave it.
No question. Do you like any particular drivers right now, especially knowing that even if they race, that the track might be a little additionally slick or anything? Is that more of? Would you say that just taking a look at the last couple of years at this track, and especially Kevin Harvick last year, that you definitely want to go with those drivers that have been successful at this track the last couple of years? And we always look at past performances as tracks. We always do that. That's always a consideration. But do you consider it even more based on the way the track is and say, hey, if a guy has been really successful here the last year or two on this track, or even on other tracks that have been similarly slick, then these are the specific drivers that make the most sense here?
I think Harvick, obviously, like you said, is the reason. I mean, I looked at his stats. He led 101 laps in 2012, 195 in 2014, 116 in 2015, 131 in 2016.
There you go.
And 292 last year. And the crazy thing is he hasn't won any of those. And his last win there is his first win, which is the year that he took over with a Apache and a Bernhardt. So I know he wants to. You've got all those laps led. He wants to win there again. And you got to look at what he did at Texas in the playoff race. And this track, yes, it's not paved, and it's going to be different grooves, but he's been so good there. I think you got to look at him. The Ford drivers, I'm just wary. I know he's a Ford driver. Kurt Busch is really good at Atlanta, but I just don't know what to expect with him based off of this package. I think Chase Elliott's got to be arguably, probably, if he drives that aggression, the favorite. He hasn't led a lap there, but he finished 8th 2 years ago and 5th last year. So now you give him a new Chevy, who they all said should be faster. And if he has that aggression, he's got the number 9 back. He's racing in front of his Georgia fans. To me, he'd be the favorite at this point.
Really? Okay.
I would put Harvick right there with him. I just don't know what to think of Jimmy Johnson. He's got 5 top 4 finishes in his last 8 starts there. But he finished 19th last year, and he just struggled on a mile and a half. If he gets back to the old Jimmy, again, he's got a new Chevy, then he could be a factor. But if I were to give you 4 or 5 right now as like my 5 favorites, I would go to Chase Elliott, Kevin Harvick. How can you go against Kyle Larson? He finished 2nd there last year. He was great on a mile and a half last year. Now you give him a new Chevy. I think he'll be up there. Truex he was a mile and a half team last year until somebody proves otherwise. I've got to take him, and I'd probably go Joey Logano as the other.
All right. Awesome, Eric. Appreciate it. At Eric_Race Review. That's your Twitter handle. And, of course, racereviewonline.com. That's the website. We'll contact you. I think my plan is to get your picks for the races each week. Of course, you'll be posting the previews for the race this weekend on your website. We'll take some of those reports and throw them on our website as well. But I'll get everybody's picks each week, and we'll tweet them out so everybody knows who our top picks and sleepers will be all season long. And again, we'll look out for your great previews for the race coming out over the weekend on your website at racereviewonline.com.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And again, like I said, just watch the pit stops. They're going to be the things to watch this weekend.
Oh, yeah. That's what killed Kevin last year.
Yep.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. Again, that is Eric Smith, racereviewonline.com. We also want to thank CJ Radoon from rotowire.com. And I'm sure we'll have Kenny Bruce on again from kennybruce.net real soon. But that's what I'm going to do. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN because I'm going to tweet out the picks every race day. So they'll be available on our Twitter handle at PrimeSN. We'll have all the updated information. Of course, again, everybody's going to have their own individual picks, though, so you can go to their websites, go check out CJ at RotoWire, check out Eric at Race Review Online, and I'll find out. I have to ask Kenny if he's going to do picks at all on his website. But I will tweet out the top picks and sleepers each week on our Twitter handle at PrimeSN. That'll do it. We'll see you tomorrow for NBA Talk with Jamal Murphy, and we'll have some horse racing coverage on Saturday with John Hardoon from thesheets.com, and that'll be the rest of our week here on the Prime Sports Radio Network. So once again, for Eric Smith, for CJ Radoon, I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next time on Prime Sports NASCAR.